Today on Let's Talk Love, I'm joined by Todd Baratz. Todd is a certified sex therapist, licensed individual and couples psychotherapist, podcast host, and writer who specializes in sex and relationships. Todd is not interested in formalities, tradition, diagnosis, or labels. In fact, he actively works against any categorical binary of the human condition. Instead, he works to humanize and empower. Today's episode, I asked Todd your sex and relationship questions. Todd gives advice on infidelity, sexual compatibility, having hard conversation about STIs and jealousy in relationships. Todd's approach is real, authentic, inclusive, and very relatable. I hope you enjoy. We tackle the big questions, not shying away from the complex, the messy, the awkward, and the joyful parts of relationships. Love. Today, I am joined by Todd Baratz. I'm so happy to have you, Todd. We had so much fun on our IG Live a while ago.
We did.
And we had so many engaging community questions for you that we couldn't even get through a quarter of them. So I'm happy that we're able to record this podcast and have you answer more of our community's questions.
Cool.
Because I really love your approach, Todd, to...
Thanks.
I mean, what you can do maybe is share. Let's start off by you sharing your philosophy. I know you're a sex therapist, you are an individual and couples counselor and psychotherapist. And I really love your approach. So why don't we start with that?
Sure. Well, philosophy is the word to use, just because I don't experience my life through a psychological only defined reality. I really think we all need a little bit more philosophy in our lives. So I really do take more of a reflective approach to some of the issues that are more historically been thought to be psychological. So I don't diagnose, but I do work as a clinical therapist. But a big portion of what I do is really understanding how our environment impacts us and creates context for relationships, families, structures, and systems that can contribute to our overall wellness, physical, mental health, or not. And the privileges that contribute to some of those experiences that we have. So that's really the baseline of my approach. Really understanding the cultural impacts that shape and define our lives rather than jumping into rules and ways to live. So instead, I approach my clients in cases with just curiosity. I just want to hear what's going on. I want to know their story, and I want to help them understand themselves and the who, what, when, where, whys. But I'm not interested in labeling, and I'm not interested in big judgmental statements about who is good, healthy, mature, immature, narcissistic, toxic, all of that other stuff.
Too many labels.
I want to know the story.
Right? Yeah. We're surrounded by so many labels and trying to put people into boxes, ourselves included. And I know you try to steer away from he's right, she's wrong, back and forth, black and white. That's just not the reality. So I just love it. So I think the best way for people to get to know you is for us to go through the questions and just how you answer and give just such solid advice. I love it. So let's do it.
Let's hope so.
Okay.
But, yeah.
So the first question is, how do you cope with differences you and your partner have in context of physical touches? There are plenty of things I don't enjoy, which he loves. Is this a deal breaker? Well, obviously it's not a deal breaker, but what would be, you're just enjoying different physical ways of interacting with each other and touching each other.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing is, the question of difference. How do I deal with this difference? Touch. How do I deal with the difference of bedtime? How do I deal with the difference of appetite, the difference of difference? With this touch stuff, okay, so we could say logistically, have how much of the two of you talked about the differing types of touch? What are we talking about? Are we talking about sexual touch? Are we talking more sensual? Are we talking about affection? And can you give him or them, I don't know their genders, can you give them the type of touch they want, and can they give you the type of touch that you want? Can you show up for each other in that way? Because logistically it doesn't have to be one or the other. But I think what we're talking more about is how to negotiate differences. Especially differences that involve a physical communication for many people are tough. The power of touch, whether we're talking about, again, sexual, sensual, whatever, affectionate, for all of us is a pretty triggering topic, specifically in terms of intimate relationships, even with strangers, when you're meeting somebody, hug, handshake, especially now with COVID. So touch is a really meaningful story, and especially in their long-term partners, one, it's likely that 2 partners or 3 partners are all going to have differing preferences for touch. So we have to understand, accept, and encourage and honor those differences. But I think for most people, we come from, at least I know I came from a place where being different wasn't necessarily, no, it was not encouraged. Being gay, it was not encouraged, being different, not straight. So negotiating differences with someone that, the consequences could be pretty bad for me, like an intimate partner, many people shut down. So I always think about the question within a question, what do we do differencing touch? Well, what is it that shuts you down in the face of difference? What is it that you lose your capacity to prompt and ask your partner, or to give your partner what they want when difference arises? For most people, it's anxiety. Anxiety about rejection, shame about preference, especially if it's sexual. But even if it is about affection, feeling like, well, my partner says they don't want to do it, so I'm the problem, or they're there's a problematizing thing that happens to you. So long story short, talk about your differences, negotiate it, and, don't overthink that. If it's affection, give each other the type of affection you want. But then think a little bit deeper on the role of difference in your overall life and what that brings up, because it seems like there's
if it's an issue for you, it's a trigger. Yeah. Then there's something that could be underneath that.
For sure.
That's often the case, isn't it?
And there is for everybody.
Yes. Oh, I know. This is the whole thing about relationships and why they're so freaking difficult. Because it's like, this isn't just the topical issue of, I don't want to be touched that way. It could be something way deeper, like you said, about managing the differences and how, wow. Totally. I've never thought of it that way, Todd. That's awesome.
Okay.
So infidelity. I reconnected with my ex recently, and we are both in much better places to start fresh with each other. The thing is weighing on me is that we reconnected when he was still with someone else. How can we make peace with the fact that we both crossed some lines we thought we'd never cross to be with each other?
Well, I mean, another highly triggering issue for people. Infidelity, cheating, affairs, betrayal, abandonment, trust, honesty. I mean, so many different things come up in the face of this question. I mean, the first thing I would say, there's so many questions about, is it good or bad to get back together with an ex? Should I, shouldn't I? Which,
and that is one of the questions we have after this.
Yeah,
so we could talk about, yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I think for some people it works, and for some people it doesn't. What I always tell people is, you can't have the same relationship again. Just, but you have to make sure to do something different, literally anything different. If you have access to therapy, I really do think that's a must-do thing. If you're in a relationship and it ends, you have to, and you want to get back together, you have to figure out what happened. So you can't just click back in. Well, you could, many people do, but I would discourage that. I would encourage putting in a lot of work. And in terms of the question about trust or about infidelity, it's unclear about whether or not there was infidelity in their relationship or if it was just the matter of they met each other while they were both in relationships. there's no answer. I mean, I think so many people think there's like a huge book that will say the answer what to do when, but like these things are complicated.
Yes.
I always do this two thing where I say, well, at the surface, here is the like logistical, like do this kind of a thing, but then also there's meaning behind it. So with this, I mean, to me, it seems like the person might be overthinking it. That many people get into relationships when they're in a relationship, and it has nothing to do with cheating or infidelity. That this once a cheater, always a cheater thing, it's not a thing. It's a stigmatized cultural phenomenon that people believe, but it's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't see this as a big factor, but it seems like this person might be anxious about that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, talk about it. Talk about it with your partner and plan. But at the same time, we can put all of this effort into our relationship, and someone can cheat. Cheating happens. It's just something to talk about with your partner and to be open and realistic that this is something that happens in relationships.
Yeah. So in relationship, this question is, how do you talk to your partner about their bad habits and lack of prioritizing self-care and health?
You don't. No. I don't know. It really depends. Everyone has bad habits. Bad defined by, I don't know who, but, if someone's not showering and they smell, I mean, you can say in a loving way, hey, so I love you, but you stink. And you can laugh about it and call them a stinky little piggy and be cute, but be like, okay, and now it's time to get in the shower. But some other habits may not be the thing to get on their case about. It really depends. You kind of have to just use yourself, whatever you think is best, and how much you know your partner in terms of what they might find offensive. But I don't know, I think humor plays a really big role in relationships that people often underestimate during these potentially conflictual dynamics. So, the tone of your voice is going to have an impact. The words you use will have an impact. The pre-existing relationship's going to have an impact. So it isn't just about what do I do? It's what's happening in the relationship, and who are you and who is your partner, and do you know yourself and them enough to approach this if it's a big deal for you. If it's not that big of a deal and it's just one of those fucking annoying things they do, I would say deal with it. Yes. But it depends. I don't know. I mean, someone's chewing loudly. I mean, are you gonna police their chewing? I mean, I would probably say that would be annoying. Both to hear the chewing loudly all the time, but also to be policed while you chew. So it really depends on what it is. If it's a real personal hygiene thing, and it gets in the way of sex and wanting to be close with a person, say something. If they have bad breath, say something if you don't want to kiss them. The alternative is...
if it's affecting your relationship and your connection, then I think it's you just have to say something. But I like the idea about obviously just using some humor around it, and it is how you approach that conversation. That does probably have 100%. To happen if it's affecting your relationship, right?
Yeah. Humor is I think a huge important part of relationships. That you can really disarm a lot of conflict through humor and prevent conflicts from humor. Versus, if you say you stink, that's going to really make someone feel bad. But if you make a joke about it and you giggle and you smile and you laugh and you say, let's take a shower together, and I'm going to make sure that I get you nice and clean, then that could be not a conflict, that could be a connection. So, we really need to think about being gentle and cute and funny and flirty.
How would you want to be approached?
Yeah.
Right? So I know you are a sex therapist, and there's a lot of sex questions. So,
great.
Is sexual compatibility a thing? I've never had crazy chemistry with anyone. Is it me or just the wrong matches? Can sexual compatibility grow?
All of the above.
Yes.
I mean, look, this is something that I, as a single person dating, I'm trying to answer for myself. And it really depends on the person. The challenge is the opportunity to develop compatibility sometimes is non-existent because you can feel so much a lack of compatibility, and that could make you anxious and then decrease the opportunities you have to actually have open communications and experiment and explore to actually try and create something compatible. But usually what I would say to start with is to start to try to create compatibility and see what happens. And for some people, I do think it can, and for some people, it's just not going to be there. But you do have to get your anxiety under control about it. Otherwise, you won't be able to explore and talk about and have fun when you're trying to create some compatibility. It also depends, again, on what we're talking about. Some people say we're not sexually compatible because, I don't know, they're a top and I'm a bottom, or they like it rough and I like it gentle. And so then the question becomes, okay, well, can you both come a little bit to the middle, and maybe one day you do them and the next day, is the other person's turn. But so it depends whether we're talking about compromise or we're talking about connection. There are many different layers to this, but I would say try to create it. I don't know if anyone could say, no, if you're not sexually compatible, it can't be created. Or yes, it can be. It's a case-by-case kind of a thing, but I would definitely say try. And the things that you do to try is, to really give a full presentation, a PowerPoint, draw a picture of exactly what you want and what you like, what you want to hear, the words you want your partner to say or not say, the places that, really get into it. And let's see if it can unfold a little bit slower.
I think it's, I think about myself and how when I was younger and dating, I wasn't comfortable talking about sex. And I think this is common with a lot of people in general. Yes. It's like, but this is such an important part of a relationship. If you want to have a very healthy and happy sexual life, then talk about it. And I think that's just so it's underrated, right? Like that you have to communicate like what you like and what you don't like and how you want to be touched. And that way you hopefully can increase the satisfaction you have with the partner, right?
Yeah. For a lot of people, it's a lot of anxiety that makes them inhibited. And sometimes we can misinterpret inhibition as a lack of compatibility. And so for some people, it may take them a little bit of time before they feel uninhibited with a new partner, before they're able to really feel comfortable and to relax into expressing the full spectrum or whatever small part of the spectrum they've felt comfortable expressing in the first place. So, sure, sometimes it's like mind-blowing sex at the beginning, but not always. And that's not necessarily a sign of a lack of compatibility. It's a sign of many, many different things. So in the absence of knowing, we have to simply try and see what works and what doesn't work. And if you try and nothing works and you can't sexualize the person and you're not really attracted to them, then, I think you can call it. Say we're not compatible.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. In the absence of knowing, you have to try. Love that.
Yeah.
We at Real Love Ready are so excited to be hosting In Bloom, a love and relationship summit, April 14th and 15th, 2023 in Vancouver, BC. Join us for an insider pass to the most trusted relationship expertise, an intimate weekend of in-person or virtual learning, growth, and community. We're bringing you the insights and tools you need to learn and bloom in your relationships. Head over to realloveready.com to learn more and get your tickets. We truly hope to see you there. So what about this question? This is about how can you tell the difference between relationship anxiety, like anxiety you're feeling, and your intuition in relation to having questions about your partner or somebody you're dating?
Well, it's usually both. And I wouldn't dismiss either. The challenge with firstly, talk to your partner if you're anxious about something and you think something's happening or not happening, or just ask them. It was a quick kind of thing to do there. But the other piece here is that sometimes we're picking up on something and it's making us anxious about our relationships, but the meaning we assign to it isn't necessarily accurate. So our partner could be busy or depressed or stressed out about work or feeling like a failure or whatever, and somewhat withdrawn. And we could understand that as, they're disinterested in me, things aren't going well, they won't even talk to me, me, through this kind of narcissistic lens of, I did something wrong. And that's okay that that's happening. But again, inquire, prompt, and ask. So that's why it's often both. We may be picking up on real things, but we may be likely often assigning the incorrect meaning to what we're picking up on. And then other times we're picking up on stuff and we don't even know that we're picking up on it, but it's there. So I wouldn't dismiss any part of just relational anxiety or it's not just, it is relational anxiety, probably, and it is something you're responding to. Yes. And neither of which needs to be something big and scary. It's just something, to really see if we can think about what's going on. What's the story behind your anxiety? What might you be picking up on? How might you approach your partner and say, hey, it's probably a mixture of things, but I'm feeling like you, blah, blah, blah. I'm a little worried, but it will take both different approaches. So a little inner inquiry and a little outer inquiry.
Yeah.
But a lot of this stuff, really comes down to fear of rejection, a fear of something, in terms of not talking about sex, not asking our partners if what we're picking up on is accurate, not doing something in the context of a relationship. And we might consciously not be thinking, I'm afraid, but the withdrawal, the retreat, the internalizing, this is I think, earlier stuff for most people when we get to this almost not a regress place, but when we stay internal and we shut down and we just simply don't ask, there's a lot more to that story when we don't engage, especially with a partner. It's not some random person on the street. It is our partner that hopefully we know and feel safe with. And it's specifically in that context that we engage in a dynamic that is likely a reenactment of some earlier something that is surfacing with our partner, but is about the earlier stuff. So figure out what the story is.
Yeah. Yeah. So on your Instagram, you have, I love your Instagram, Todd. There's just a lot of amazing advice and wisdom that anybody can learn from. And you have relationship agreements to follow. And I thought we would go through those because they're just, sure. They're simple, but just good, really good, right? Number one, we will create a safe relational culture. Can you please explain what that means when you want to create a safe relational culture between you? Is it you want to feel safe, to be yourself, and also rules of engagement? Is that where you're going with this?
Oh, I don't know what I meant. No, I'm kidding. I wrote this a while ago, and I tend to just repost things. A safe relational culture. When we think about safety is defined by a variety of things for people in relationships. When I think of safety, I want to feel respected. I want to be given space to speak if I want to speak about something. This is about the difference thing. Feeling okay to say, no, I don't want that, or I'm going to go to bed early, you can stay up, or I'm going to go away with my friends, and not have someone completely overreact. So feeling safe to be ourselves in the context of our partner.
Yep.
Yeah. So
okay. And
no
number
name calling.
two,
I think
you said yes. Well, yes.
Go ahead.
You said we'll be realistic about validation. You're not expecting your partner to be a therapist, for instance. No. I mean, and be able to validate everything that you are feeling.
Yeah, I mean, this validation stuff's a lot. I posted something and people have really called me out about this, saying that it's really important that our partners validate us, and of course it's important that our partners validate us, that's really, a nice experience most of the time, but we can't expect our partners to always be there to validate us, especially during conflict. Sometimes our experience and their experience are going to completely differ, maybe even contradict. And this is what is so important about differentiating in a relationship, is being able to stay connected to ourselves, with and honoring our partner, even if they're completely different, without requiring validation in return. I think people often talk about healthy communication, and I don't know, I read this in some book that was like mind-blowing when I read this. They were talking about, so healthy communication as defined by, validation and understanding and feeling seen, etc. But then the person who wrote this was like, but when you're communicating, you're communicating. So what, we've newly redefined healthy communication as only including, the communication that feels good, that's validating, where you feel seen and it's fluffy and it's wonderful. And like, yes, that's so great. And let's all strive for this. But, I think any of us who've been in long-term relationships knows this is not the reality. That people get pissed off and triggered, and, we're human beings, and adults do throw temper tantrums. And it's simply, sometimes communication goes awry. So we kind of have to allow for that. I'm not encouraging abuse or yelling and screaming, but, we have to be realistic about how much we expect from our partners in terms of how valid they make us feel. Because the real kind of internal validation has to come internally. And of course, we want our partners to be mostly validating. But I'm saying there will be times, maybe 20, maybe 30% of the time, our partner is simply not going to be able to say, I validate you, I see you, and I want to hold space for you. It's just not going to happen. And if it does happen 100% of the time, that sounds a little concerning.
Yes, and I think it's coming at disagreements and arguments from, learning the skills that we're all learning, especially in this community, right? Yeah. And taking a step back, and like there's times now, and it's taken me years to get there, but I'm like able to be like, you're right. And it's not about right or wrong, but actually it is sometimes, right? It's just like, actually I was out of line, and you were like, you're right. And I validate how you're thinking, and I was not rational in that. Right? Yeah. Being able to be like, I take accountability for when it's just like, I was wrong and you were right. And that
takes a lot of practice, years, decades sometimes.
Yeah.
So I think when we start people off who have no relational education, no background, no therapy, and saying you must validate each other all the time, it's outrageous.
Yeah, it is. So, I'll go through the other ones quickly. You said we will not expect a relationship to fill everything in our life. That's for sure. We will not test each other or expect mind reading. We will not hold on to conflict. That's a good one. We will prioritize sex. These are just simple agreements that I think every intimate relationship requires. We will develop self-awareness, and we will be independent and autonomous. Those are solid.
Yes,
those are solid agreements, Todd.
Yeah.
No, they really are. So going back to sex, do our kinks and fetishes have anything to do with our mental health or childhood trauma?
Maybe. People ask this question a lot, and it worries me. And one part of it worries me is that people may want to ask this question because they want to do away with a kink or a fetish. So as they're approaching their kink and fetish as a result of something bad. No, like if I can resolve my daddy issues, I won't want to be choked while I'm having sex because being choked is bad. That's a no. We don't want to understand ourselves so we can stop being ourselves. We want to understand ourselves sexually, emotionally, whatever, so we can honor ourselves and feel comfortable being ourselves. So there are some people who have kinks and fetishes that are related to traumas, and there are some people that don't. The same thing could go for food or any type of preference or thing that makes us feel excited. Like people who grew up going to the amusement park may like rides later as kids. Does that mean, what is that, or not? Honestly, it doesn't matter. What I find fascinating, though, about sex, if people are open to learning, is that it can deepen your story. It can deepen how you understand relational dynamics in your own history. For example, people who are more voyeurs, often have experiences that are connected to wanting to be invisible, not wanting to be seen, which is often connected to earlier experiences with their parents where they did feel invisible and they weren't seen. And so is that to say that, okay, now they know that and they shouldn't be voyeurs? No, it's just to say that, wow, this is how deep some of this is. And this is sometimes what arouses us, where it comes from. So I think it's if you want to explore where your erotic mind comes from, I think that's great if you want to create meaning, but only to create meaning.
Yes.
But there's a
Wonderful.
lot there. But
There sure
also,
is.
there doesn't have to be either. You can just say, you know what, I like feet because I like feet.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be specific. It doesn't need to be related to a trauma in order for it to be valuable and pleasurable and wonderful.
Yeah. So this is about STIs. How would you discuss the topic of STIs with a partner who may have unknowingly exposed you to one? How do you address resentment in such a case?
How do you address STIs with a partner who may have unknowingly exposed you to one? Seems like it would go the other way around. That the one who exposed a partner would address it. Again, it's a conversation. I mean, if you want to, the question is, how do you,
I'm thinking if it's your partner and they gave you an STI and they didn't know they did,
then
you're resentful about it. I mean, I think I would be. But it's like having that conversation. I mean, like, guess what?
Yeah, I'd want to know, what's the STI, what happened, what's going on. I want to know if they were tested, if they need treatment, if I need treatment, if it was an open relationship, if it was a closed relationship, what the rules are in terms of expectations about hooking up with other people. But there's a lot here. But again, I think, you want to talk to your partner.
Yes. It's funny how there's so much repetition in a lot of these questions that we receive from our community and just people in general around just having the hard conversations. I mean, I think about an STI, and that's a very serious conversation that you have to have. It's your health. And if this is going in between you and with other people, this could have a lot of detrimental effects. So it's a conversation you have to have.
I mean, that's why I always say there's questions within
easy.
A question. Yeah. I mean, there are questions within a question. And, I think some of these questions are, you need to talk about it, blah, blah, blah. This kind of logistical, action-oriented aspect to finding potentially if there is a solution, or at least easing whatever tension the not addressing it has created. But then there's also the question of the question, which is the anxious component, in terms of something is coming up that you are not able to engage around, that you're worried about the consequence, the response, and the result. Like I was saying with difference, most people have a hard time negotiating it because they weren't safe to express difference as a kid. They weren't asked. They weren't told they could be different, whether that's about emotions or about hobbies or whatever difference. The conversation about STIs. STIs have been historically stigmatized, unnecessary, so outrageously. It'd be like we're talking about strep throat, but we're not. We're talking about an STI. It's no different. But the discomfort and the fear of bringing it up comes from the cultural stigma that really defines STIs. So there's a lot of different questions that lurk behind some of these questions that are also important to consider. And it's, it's a lot of anxiety. I think it's a lot of anxiety, and people want to try to find a solution to that anxiety. And, I think we all know, okay, if you have a problem with a partner, you have to talk to them about it. But what is the experience of a problem? What is your experience of your partner? What is your experience of the relationship? What's the environment of the relationship? What shapes the values that shut you down to talk about it? Is it cultural? Is it familial? Is it medical? Is it philosophical? What is it? So there's a lot here for people to think about if they're open to expanding how they're experiencing these here and now conflicts. Because that's what's happening is, we experience all of this emotion in the here and now, and it shuts us down, and it surfaces, in our current conscious life. But it's about so much more. And so we really need to widen our perspectives here.
Yes.
But it's easy for me to say, when I'm not the person who has to talk to my partner, and I'm not the person who has to make the decision. So I'm biased.
So around mental health, I have bipolar disorder, and it affects my ability to be open and communicate effectively. I also have never been in a relationship before, or at least not something I would consider serious. I have the biggest crush on a guy from college, but he seems so intimidating. I simply don't know how to approach him. Any tips?
Talk to him.
That's a hard one. But it maybe it just comes down to just, if you don't try, like, what do you have to lose?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about some of these things is we can spend so much more time questioning, wondering, thinking, oh no, and being fearful, much more time doing that than if we were to simply start a conversation, and it's often harder not to than it is to actually engage. I learned this a while ago. But it's really true, is that, and our time and our energy is really fucking precious. And if we're spending, weeks and months in agony worrying about something that could, we could really improve our overall life experience by simply engaging, we have to think about, okay, well, what's going on here that we can't engage and create a sense of calm within ourselves? Because the reality is what we're fearing is actually a lot less scary than not approaching it, because we've spent so much time worrying about it. And worry and fear is pain and suffering. If you want to suffer less and if you want to decrease your pain, this avoidance stuff doesn't necessarily work. It just increases your pain and suffering. So talk to the guy. That sounds exciting. It's so fun.
Does. Take a risk and just do it, right? Really, what do you have to lose? Nothing. I
Literally
see
nothing.
No. So what do you have tips for how to break out of a pattern of being attracted to unavailable people? This really, and I've heard you say this before, Todd, and I really would like to understand this better. If you're with somebody that is demonstrating that they're not available to you, this shows that you are unavailable on some level, right? Yourself, maybe?
Yeah.
But how do you self-identify ways that you're unavailable, if that really is the case?
Well, if you're pursuing only unavailable people, then you are clearly unavailable. If we're only going to restaurants that don't serve food, we're trying to restrict our appetite. So the focus lately is so much on other people. They're doing this bad thing. They're toxic. They're a narcissist. They're unavailable. Shift away from focusing on this person being unavailable and focus more on connecting with what it is that you want, and doing that in a way that you can trust yourself and feel confident in believing that what you want is okay. And I think that when it comes down to it, is people have a very low self-esteem and don't take themselves seriously enough because they don't trust themselves. And so they pursue people that can't give them what they're seeking. And again, this is about earlier stuff. But it can be a pattern. I mean, the other thing, just in general, there are a lot of unavailable people, not bad people, but people that are just preoccupied, maybe literally busy, maybe emotionally unavailable. A lot of people are unavailable.
Yeah.
But
not everybody is relationship, not even the word ready. It's like they actually don't have the capacity to have a long-term relationship. They just, or the skills or the want. Like, what would you say around that, Todd?
I think a lot of people aren't available to themselves, are busy with work, are socially scheduled to the point where they literally don't have time, for whatever reasons, aren't available. And that, I think, is more than the majority of people. I don't know, I was reading some statistic. It's a lot of people.
Wow.
But again, I think what prevents us from investing in ourselves? And that's really the question, because if we want a relationship and we're pursuing relationships with people who are rejecting us for whatever reason, doesn't matter, why are we doing that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So many people are focused on why'd they do that, or why didn't they want me? Well, the question is, why do you want them? Why are you pursuing them?
Yes.
And if you're pursuing someone who is not able to give you what you want, it's a problem.
Yeah.
It's like going to a sushi restaurant if you don't eat sushi.
Yeah. Why are you doing that?
The challenge, though, is that so many people develop attachments, and I don't mean attachment style. I mean just attachments. They get close, they feel a bond, they feel chemistry, compatibility, whatever word, and they feel attached to someone who's they also know is unavailable. And so it can, in this being single and dating is really fucking hard and really lonely. And if it's been a long time and someone holds us and kisses us and shows up sometimes and we fuck and it feels good and, it's like breathing air. And so, it can feel like mission impossible to say, okay, I'm going to cut off my windpipe and never breathe again. But, to some extent, it's okay if you can't stop seeing this person or talking to them, because I think it's hard for many people. Been there. But what I would say is make sure you're seeing other people, go on other dates, put yourself in other positions so you can see and be reminded that there actually are people out there that's not going to take as much work as you are putting in to feel desired by this person, where they will be available and they'll say, when are you free next? And you'll set up plans and you'll meet, and it won't be hard logistically. You won't be negotiating the intimacy. It'll just happen. But if you stay waiting by your phone, dating this one person who's unavailable, it's nothing's going to change. So, it's so easy to say, stop pursuing unavailable people, but some people simply cannot. So then what I would say is start pursuing other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just any other people.
So with jealousy, Todd, when you've got clients, one of the question is, what are some tools to use for jealousy? I get jealous of my partner's best friend. And when I was thinking about this question, I was like, well, does this come down to trust, like past wounds? And when you're dealing with somebody that has jealousy issues, it's so dependent on the relationship, right? I mean, you could be with somebody that's actually demonstrating behaviors that you're like, are not cool. Like I'm feeling kind of jealous here because totally. You're crossing some lines, or it could be related to past stuff, right?
Yeah. The first thing I'll say though is that jealousy is a normal experience, emotion, like happiness, joy, excitement. I think similar to anger, jealousy has been one of those experiences and emotions that have been stigmatized as being bad, as being rooted in something negative. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes, it's okay to be jealous. And I think that's kind of the first step when we think about jealousy, is accepting that we're going to feel jealous. It's not going to be, it's not going to kill us.
It's a normal emotion.
It's natural. A normal thing. And to be comfortable talking about it. Again, this is where I think humor is a good idea. It does depend on the situation, as you're saying. Like, your partner might be crossing a boundary. If they're spending every day with their friend and canceling plans on you to spend with their friends. I think the question isn't about jealousy. The question is about, getting your needs fulfilled in the relationship. And it sounds like you may be shrinking down. So this is, again, about engaging. But jealousy is normal. I would say, have a conversation with your partner, not on the daily, because that is unnecessary for both. But, one conversation, maybe come up with a secret word. It's a silly word. Ask for reassurance when you need it. But, I think really jealousy becomes such a scary monster for people, and it doesn't have to be.
So what do you mean? What do you mean when you're asking somebody to come up with a silly word? Like, can you give us some context around that? Like, are you saying that if
like
you're
I'm feeling blueberry again? I don't know, or I'm feeling like Charlie's entered the room. Where you come up with something that's not a scary thing, because some people, they hear the word jealousy and they go on the defensive or whatever, or they become passive aggressive, which is what you don't want to do if you're jealous. But to just face it head on. But a lot of this, again, comes down to, I think, self-soothing and differentiating in terms of being able to be separate, and also being able to let your partner be separate too, and feeling comfortable and safe in that space. And jealousy often disrupts that comfort and safety, and it feels uncomfortable. It feels like it's not a good feeling. So, acceptance, tolerance, and coping with some of that jealousy without writing a full narrative and story into what it might mean beyond a simple feeling. And again, it might mean something, but, who knows?
Yeah. So there is so much talk, education, tools about self-reflection around your your attachment style. Mm-hmm. And I know we started this conversation about how it's not about labels. And, you say that adult love is too complex for an attachment diagnosis, right? But I'm sure you get a lot of people that are saying, like, this question is, can you offer tools and healthy habits for an anxious attachment style? And if somebody was avoidant, you could probably, give them some tools too. But when people ask you about that, what is your approach?
Well, if I have a client that comes in and they see I'm anxiously attached, and it feels uncontrollable, what do I do? So I say, tell me about your relationship. What's going on? What are you anxious about? Are you anxious they're going to leave? Are you anxious that you're unlovable? What's the story? And I want to know, is this the first time you've experienced this type of anxiety? Or, I want to know what's going on there. If someone wants to use that frame, then that's, I will work within it. But it's not something that I voluntarily pursue just because I think it's become more of a cultural phenomenon and a trend than I don't know, at least for me, than something that's been helpful in my clinical work or just work in general in terms of understanding people. I often talk a lot about attachment in terms of attachment traumas, and in terms of what it means to attach sometimes when people are reenacting certain attachment dynamics with their partner. But oftentimes as adults, those dynamics are tied up into a variety of different real life experiences that contribute to the felt experience of anxiety. So it's rare that it's just a simple matter of, somebody has an anxious attachment style and they're just anxious. As I was saying before, you had asked the difference between insight or intuition and, relational anxiety and insight. And anxiety. Yeah. And, as I said, it's usually both. So it's rare that I have someone come in where they're anxious about their relationship, claiming to have an anxious attachment style, and they're not actually responding to a partner that's doing something or a relational environment or something that is contributing to their anxiety. So I want to know what the story is. And in terms of their life, their experience growing up, their attachment relationships, but also what's going on in their relationship, what's trust like, what's safety like, if it's anxiety about being abandoned, does the partner know? What does the partner do? Are they willing to offer reassurance, or do they just yell and say, I can't give you reassurance, I can't remind you every time that I love you, which isn't a very loving thing to say. It would make me feel anxious too. So there's a full spectrum of color here that goes missed, I think, when people are like, oh, my attachment style is anxious and my partner is avoidant. What do we do? There's a lot there. So I don't necessarily know to tell this person, but this is what I would do in session. And usually once the blanks start to be filled in with information and story and color, it becomes self-evident what needs to be done. But people, I think, have gotten so disconnected from themselves that it can be hard to understand the difference between, is this a complete anxious attachment style? Is this you're being very triggered by the dynamic that's been created in your relationship? What's happening? Yes.
Wow, I love that. Something that you've said that I'm going to quote you. You say traditional relationships aren't the goal. Break the rules and cultivate a relationship trajectory that works best for you. There's no inherently factually correct way to structure a relationship. That's just the truth, right? I think the older I get,
but not the truth that we grew up with.
That's absolutely not. And I think that it's like we're lost in this dynamic of wanting to have the traditional, but also not understand, it's like not fully understanding and living the fact that that's not traditional. And it's not, we all have to create the relationship that we want, which is so custom to two different individuals coming together with two different histories and how we were raised and our past relationships. It's way more complicated than that. There's no such thing as a fairy tale, which is what you talk a lot about too.
I wish there was. I mean, I was in a relationship for 10 years, and it ended, and the idea of getting in another relationship, I say I want it to be forever. Even though I know that, it's not necessarily, it's sometimes not a thing anymore. That people don't stay together forever. but I grew up in the fairy tale land where, you got married and stayed together forever and, vows till death do you part. But it's just not how things have, at least currently, unfolded with love lately.
Yeah. So Todd, tell us about the course that you offer. You offer courses on your website, and how people, there's a lot of people that just don't have access to a therapist, or let's just where do you start, right? But you do offer your courses online. And so how does that work with people that want to engage with you and grow and learn about themselves and relate better? Tell us about that.
So the course is on love and sex. There's 2 separate courses that are part of the program. But I think the best part of the program is the sessions with me. And those are sessions with a group of people. For me, they're extremely powerful. It's basically like group therapy where, we talk about all of the questions here, but we get the story. And I ask about the story, and I hear the story, and we all share, including myself, the story, and how it's all very relatable in terms of the anxieties that come up, what shuts us down, the origins of those withdrawals, etc. So those to me are the most important aspects of the program, but it also, when you sign up, you get classes and workbooks with exercises to practice and journals to help you reflect better and create self-awareness.
I love that.
And that's online.
Yes, wonderful. And that's on your toddbaratz.com website.
That's on my website. But also, most therapists have courses. And so as therapy for some people is inaccessible, these courses are really great ways to work on yourself. So whether it's mine or someone else's, you can really find a lot of programs online, low cost, that can be really impactful in your relationship and your life.
Definitely. And, I love the fact that you shared that you've been in therapy since you were 10 years old, and you're still doing it. And I think there's the stigma around therapy. I mean, it's so necessary. I love having my therapist help me.
I need a space.
You do. But some people don't have that. But Todd, you can be that for people at an accessible price by people taking your course. So that's fantastic. Well, I so enjoyed our time together, and
Me too.
I really appreciate the work you're doing, and we'll continue bringing you into our community.
It's good to see you again. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Todd, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
You too.
Welcome to Let's Talk Love, the podcast that brings you real talk, fresh ideas, and expert insights every week. Our guests are the most trusted voices in love and relationships, and they're here for you with tools, information, and friendly advice to help you expand the ways you love, relate, and communicate. We tackle the big questions, not shying away from the complex, the messy, the awkward, and the joyful parts of relationships.